My name is Jason Chan from the Foundation and your MC for today. To start off, let's take a group photo together. May everyone please look towards our photographer on stage and show us your best smiles. As our photographer will be taking a few photos, please kindly remain as still as possible throughout the process. Thank you. Thank you. Now, may we have the pleasure to invite our speakers and guests onto the stage for a group photo, please. Mr. Bernard Chan, Chairman of our Hong Kong Foundation. Our keynote speaker, Dato Seri CHEAH Cheng Hye, Co-Chairman and Co-Chief Investment Officer of Value Partners Group. Our opening speaker, Mr. Daryl Kong, Governor of our Hong Kong Foundation, Deputy Chairman of Sino Group, and Chairman of Hong Kong ASEAN Foundation. Professor Yukshan Wong, Governor of our Hong Kong Foundation and Chief Convener of Hong Kong Chronicles Institute. Dr. Alan Zieleman, Governor of our Hong Kong Foundation. Mr. Ping Cheng Lau, Governor of our Hong Kong Foundation. Dr. Jane Lee, President of our Hong Kong Foundation. And Mr. Nuri Vitachi, the Fireside Chat host and editor of Friday Every Day. Okay, thank you. May all guests please remain on stage and kindly step forward to the front row, please. Now, may we also invite the following guests and representatives of our supporting partners, and venue sponsor onto the stage, please. Mr. Muzambli Markham, Consul General of the Consulate General of Malaysia. Ms. Jasmine Lee, Managing Partner of EY Hong Kong and Macau. Mr. Siu Tong Jat, Research Council member of our Hong Kong Foundation. Mr. Kevin Lam, Council member of Hong Kong Chronicles Institute and advisor of our Hong Kong Foundation. Mrs. Stella Lau, Council member of the Academy of Chinese Studies and advisor of our Hong Kong Foundation. Dato Gan Kai Chun, Chairman of the Malaysian Chamber of Commerce Hong Kong Macau, which is our supporting partner. Mr. Charles CHEAH, CEO of the Hong Kong ASEAN Foundation, which is also our supporting partner. And Mr. Michael Lai, who will be joining the second part of our Fireside Chat session. Thank you. May we have your thumbs up as well, please? Thank you. Thank you all, and please be seated. To start off today's session, Mr. has carefully and thoughtfully prepared the opening remarks for us. Without further ado, let's welcome Mr. on the stage, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Cheng Hye, Chairman, Nuri, many guests here, many friends, and many Malaysian friends going to dial online coming in to see their good friend Cheng Hye today. Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to you all to this very inspiring and fun session. I would like to thank our Hong Kong Foundation for hosting the very well-received Our Hong Kong Stories series, and to thank Nuri for his very kind support in moderating today's fireside chat. Of course, my heartfelt appreciation goes to Cheng Hye for joining us today on this very special sharing. I can already tell there'll be a lot of amazing tales and pearls of wisdom. This series is all about amazing stories from different perspectives and angles, but there is one thing in common, and that is they all tell inspiring stories and highlight values that define Hong Kong, our home. There's only one Hong Kong. Mr. CHEAH is a very good friend of mine, and he is a very good friend to Hong Kong. He loves the city where opportunities and possibilities abound. Mr. CHEAH was born in Malaysia, and he came to Hong Kong to pursue his dreams after a successful career with the Penang-based newspaper, The Star, a time he recalls fondly for inculcating good habits that paved the way for his future success. 5 decades on, Mr. CHEAH has built a successful business in Hong Kong in asset management, an area that he's very passionate about, and he remains an active fund manager. Value Partners Group, headquartered in Hong Kong, has grown into one of the largest asset management companies in Asia under Cheng Hye's leadership. The vast collection of development and wise advice together with Cheng Hye's comprehensive experiences have made today's session all the more valuable for all of us here and online. There will be so much to learn, so I encourage you to share your thoughts and ask a lot of questions. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. M, for the thoughtful speech. Before moving on to our fireside chat session, let's watch a video on Dato Seri CHEAH Cheng Hye, highlighting the miraculous opportunities he has come across here in Hong Kong. Please enjoy.
My name is CHEAH Cheng Hye. One of the best decisions I made in my life was to come to Hong Kong. I was only 21 years old when I accepted a job in 1974. It was the first time I had traveled outside my home country of Malaysia. I was a journalist, and coming to Hong Kong transformed my life in a way I could never have believed. In Hong Kong, my journalism career flourished as a correspondent for the Far Eastern Economic Review and the Asian Wall Street Journal, two of the most prestigious publications in the Asia Pacific region at that time. Then Hong Kong gave me an unbelievable opportunity to change my career. When I was already in my 30s, I became a fund manager. I co-founded Value Partners Group, which became a well-known asset management company and the winner of more than 250 performance awards. Value Partners started with only 2 staff, and today it employs 160 people. It is among the best known and biggest asset management companies now in the Asia Pacific region. Thanks to my work with Value Partners, according to local media, I became the biggest taxpayer in Hong Kong in the late 2000s. I mentioned this because I want you to know I experienced the true miracle of Hong Kong, what Hong Kong has offered to so many immigrants to the territory. Also, it is in Hong Kong that I met my wife, who was a civil servant in the Hong Kong government, and together we started a loving and successful family that continue to contribute to the community. Now, thanks to our Hong Kong Foundation, I will have the opportunity to share my story with you.
Now, let's move on to the fireside chat for a deeper dive into Dato Seri CHEAH's personal journey from Malaysia to connecting the world. Starting with a flourishing journalism career, followed by career change, eventually leading to successful entrepreneurship. Without further ado, let's invite Dato Seri CHEAH and our host, Mr. Nuri Vitachi, onto the stage, please. Thank you.
Actually, I have a very personal reason for interviewing Dato CHEAH, because we are twins in a certain way. He came to Hong Kong and stayed in Chungking Mansions. I came to Hong Kong and stayed in Chungking Mansions. He worked for the Far East Economic Review and the Wall Street Journal. I worked for the Far East Economic Review and the Wall Street Journal. He became ultra rich, handsome, and loved by women. Where did I go wrong, right? We'll find out the answer to that in a minute. But first, I want to say a big welcome to the Malaysians here. I notice while milling around, there are lots of Malaysians. Can you put up your hand if you have a connection with Malaysia? Yay! Thank you for the support. Right. Shanghai, now we've got to get your real story. I mean, Penang in the 1950s. That must have been a pretty humble place. What was your background? What did your parents do?
So let me start by just saying good afternoon to everyone and express great appreciation, gratitude for your presence today, either here physically or by Zoom. And thank you, Nuri, for having this conversation with me. Penang, I was born in 1954. And obviously, when I was a kid, my memories are quite hazy. But I want to make one important point to start with, which is that I think the most important human right is freedom from poverty. Because I was born in a very deprived circumstances. My father died when I was 9 years old. And in the Penang of those days, or rather the Malaysia of those days, if your principal breadwinner pass away when you are just a little kid, it is a major disaster. I think the reason why I've been so driven all my life, I always want to succeed in whatever I set out to do, is probably because I have almost a permanent sense of crisis that came about because of my childhood. So all through my childhood growing up in Malaysia, I had this sense that things had gone desperately wrong. I don't think I said that in public before, but now is the right time to share my story. I was almost always very hungry, don't have enough food, and barely able to stick to school. When my bicycle was stolen in 1969, I almost dropped out of school simply because it was almost impossible to walk under the tropical sun to my school. It would have been at least a 1 hour walk there and an hour walk back. Fortunately, my uncle rescued me by giving me an old bicycle. So I was able to resume my schooling career. But in fact, I only finished at Form 5. So I would have been unemployable in the profession I'm in today, or even in journalism, had I been even 2 years older. I was almost the last batch accepted by the newspaper, The Star, with only a Form 5 secondary school education. So that's one point I want to talk about, how I grew up. Now, about Malaysia and the Malaysia I knew, the women were the real heroes of our community, the Malaysian Chinese community. In my hazy memory of my childhood, I remember Malaysian men typically as being drinkers, smokers, womanizers, and seldom to be found. It was the women who held the family together. I actually told Casey, my schoolmate over here, that I one day hope to write a book about the role of Malaysian women in holding together the community. The women work in the pineapple fields, they work in construction sites, and they were there for the kids to hold them together. And this is something that is always in my memory. My mother, how she was basically in her 30s when she had 3 kids to bring up. and no means of actually making a living at all. Yeah, so we survived basically on scraps. Like I was a street hawker myself. After school, other kids go on to play sports. I would start working. I was in my Apple store. I basically just have to survive on my own savings. The other thing that comes out in my memory about life in Malaysia was the fact that Malaysian people in general, they have a deep sense of culture, courtesy, and respect for tradition. I've been thinking about that quite a bit. Why this society is so naturally courteous. I think it's part of the building blocks of living in a multi-racial society. Because Malaysia consists of three principal racial ethnic groups: the Malay people, the Chinese people, and the Indian people. So we had to learn to get along. So as a result, people tend to be, in my experience anyway, naturally courteous and very, I would say, respectful of each other's feelings. So sometimes this kind of unwillingness to be confrontational, people don't like to be confrontational, is mistaken for weakness. But actually, it is in fact a way of making sure we can get along harmoniously. Yeah. In Malaysia, I think even the bad guys are very charming, you know, and of course very bad as well. Yeah, yeah. So this is a society where people are naturally charming in a way that you seldom see anywhere else. Seldom see anywhere else in the world. It's quite an amazing situation. I would say, and my last point here about you can ask me more questions, but my last point is the school I went to, because it was a very special school. This school was called the Penang Free School, which is, of course, means it's not free at all. But I was on a scholarship. It was founded in 1816, before the British even came to Hong Kong. And I think we have a number of schoolmates on the Zoom, Kali, and as I said, my schoolmates here. This school actually provides education in the best principles of British education, including cultivation of leadership qualities, the Renaissance man, you know, spirit of inquiry, sportsmanship, things that I think the good part of the British legacy. And I was highly privileged to be able to attend that school. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So a tough upbringing. So I can see you're street hawking after school to make a few dollars to eat, and then you get a job at the Star. How old were you when you joined the Star? Tell us a little bit about your Star experience.
Oh yeah, the Star is today Malaysia's biggest newspaper, but I joined in 1971 December, when in fact it had just started in Penang. It was a Penang paper started by a diplomat actually named Dato Seri CHEAH Cheng. Yeah, and it went on to become overtake the New Straits Times, because it copied the British tabloid press, The Sun. That means there's always a page 3 half-naked girl, and a lot of emphasis on crime and things like that, you know. So the establishment paper, the newspaper, was so boring by then. Yeah. So anyway, I quickly learned to produce a successful product, you must appeal to people who actually values it and who enjoyed it. You know? The slogan for me personally of journalism is to inform, to educate, and to entertain. All three are very important. You merely end up informing people, they get bored. But the Star, okay, I started not as a journalist, but as a newspaper folder, because the newspaper was started on a shoestring budget. And we only had an old Heidelberg press from Germany that doesn't fold the paper, it just prints a broadsheet. So human beings were employed to fold it. So I saw this queue at the end of my mathematics O-level paper, my last exam in school. So I joined the queue because I had nothing else to do. And it turned out the queue is for recruiting on a nightly basis, human beings to fold the paper. So you started like 10 p.m. and finish at 5 a.m. By then your whole face is black with newspaper ink. And that's my first full-time job actually, and my entry to journalism. But I was rescued by this diplomat, Mr. Chung, or Dato Chung, because he heard that in fact I was very active in writing in my school, Penang Free School. I had actually published a short story in a magazine in London when I was only like in Form 3. And so people heard about it that I'm a writer. So Mr. Chung interviewed me and hired me on the spot to be what they call a cup reporter, a trainee reporter. We were salary at that time, Malaysian ringgit, $120 per month, which is something like 250 Hong Kong dollars per month. But in today's level, it's probably about 500 Hong Kong dollars a month. So that was my first full-time salary. And by the way, in those days, the salaries were paid in an envelope in cash. So the first time I even had a bank account was when I came to Hong Kong. Before that, I didn't even know what is really a bank account. Yeah.
Amazing. Gosh, you have to write a book about all this. Okay, so you've had a few years experience as a reporter for The Star. The Star is becoming the biggest newspaper in Malaysia. And then suddenly everything changes. You get on a boat and you leave Malaysia. So what happened?
Yes, that was in 1974. So there was this Indian colleague named Mr. Joshi. He's from India. And he is adventurous, and I know more than me. He came to Hong Kong speculatively on his own. And he got this job with Wiswa Nathan, the editor of the Hong Kong Standard. And Wiswa Nathan is a very famous journalist. So Wiswa at that time was going to expand the newspaper, the Hong Kong Standard. So cut a long story short, he gave me a contract to become what we call a sub-editor in the Hong Kong Standard in Hong Kong in 1974. And I look at this paper, it is multiples of my salary in Penang. So that was the only thing on my mind. This is good money, let's go for it. You know, I was single, you know. Then actually there's a little story here, because after I got the contract, the next step is to apply to the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur for visa, a work visa. Otherwise I cannot come. So I sent my passport, application, copy a contract to commission, and I heard nothing from them. But in the meantime, I had another problem. I didn't have enough money to buy a plane ticket. So I solved the problem by buying a place on a cargo ship to come to Hong Kong, much cheaper. And even for that, I had to sell my Honda motorbike to finance the purchase of the ship ticket, the cargo ship ticket. So I waited and waited, and then I began to panic because the British Embassy never responded. And then the boat came to Penang and sailed. So I knew I literally had missed the boat to come to Hong Kong. And this ticket is a one-way, use once only ticket. So it was a devastating blow at that. Now I can joke about it, but at that time, it was a real setback. So I took the express ride, the people's train, the train to KL with no appointment, and show up at the British High Commission office in KL. And then I asked to see the guy in charge of the visa section. And this gentleman there, some Chinese guy, and I said, you know, I really need the visa from you, and I need my passport back. Otherwise, I'm done. You know, I really resigned from my job in the Star. And the guy said, I've never seen or heard your passport. Then I said, no, you must have some record that, you know, that somebody named CHEAH Cheng Hye applied and you may have job it or whatever, but you got to give me back my passport. They said, you look around, there's nothing. I said, oh, really? Then I look at him, he has this 3-tier tray that was common in government offices in those days. And I said, how about out tray? Out tray. No, my passport is not in the out tray. In tray, not there. Then how about you take up the tray? Let me see under. And my passport is under the tray. Wow, it's crazy, you know? Oh, wow. So that was actually almost a near-death experience for me in financial and career terms. The guy had somehow put it under the tray and put the tray back on top. So I grabbed my passport, thanked him, and then took a train to Singapore. The first time I had ever left Malaysia. My first visit to Singapore too, and caught up with the ship in Singapore. And the ship then sailed to Hong Kong. It took several days. Later, the ship was busted for drug running, but I had no idea the drugs in the ship. And then this guy, Mr. Joshi, he was living in Chung Kim Mansion. So he arranged a room for me in Chung Kim Mansion. At that time, maybe now, I don't know, Chung Kim Mansion was called Little India. It doesn't matter to me. Yes. So the ship came to Hong Kong Harbour in Yamate, and the ship was too big to berth. So you had to take a small sampan, a little boat called Walla Walla to get to the shore. And then I took a taxi based on Mr. Joshi's instructions, and I landed in Chung Kim Mansion, Nathan Road. but landed in a hotel whose name I forgot. It may have been called the Imperial Hotel. And this guy came and grabbed my bag. And then he said, "Are you checking in?" I said, "No, I'm checking in Chungkin Mansion." And then I dropped my bag just like that. I was really shocked, that people behave like that. So I was, very humiliating. I mean, so there I was in my suitcase on the pavement. I mean, everyone's looking at me, But anyway, I survived that. Yeah, that was my introduction to Hong Kong.
So did you have a room in Chungking Mansions then? There was a little warren of tiny rooms, wasn't it?
It's called a Jin Tai guest house. I was very young, so all the memories are very fresh. Mr. Jin Tai personally was a refugee from Shanghai who migrated to Hong Kong, bought the whole guest house. He's never to be seen in anything except a pair of striped pajamas, day and night. And he had a little beard. And he subdivided the guest house into little compartments. So I was there, the Filipino guy was there, the Indian guy was there, and we got along. And then I was trying to throw away my garbage, my rubbish, and I asked Mr. Jin Tai, and he said, actually the system is that you throw it down the central air well. So over the years, the central air accumulated garbage. It went taller and taller, Yeah, it was crazy, yeah.
What was Hong Kong like in 1974? I guess most of the tall buildings we see weren't there.
Actually, they were quite, but in that part of Kowloon, because of the height restrictions of Kai Tak Airport, the buildings can only go to a certain height. But for a young guy from Penang coming to Hong Kong was like an adventure. Almost every day was an adventure. I was never really very serious. My whole idea was to accumulate some savings and return back to Malaysia to buy a car. I actually have a specific model, a Toyota Corolla. That's what I'm going to buy and live happily ever after, So it never occurred to me that I would stay very long. So I wasn't very committed at all. It was very convenient, very full of energy. It was a dog-eat-dog capitalist system that, in my view, brought up the best in Hong Kong people. Risk-taking, entrepreneurship. People never really blame the government for anything in those days because they think it's a natural phenomenon, this boom and bust cycle. You try, you fail, you try again, and that's up to you. In the 70s, I was working in the Hong Kong Standard and Hong Kong TVB. I was the deputy news producer. They even had a touch-based policy. Chinese people from the mainland who try to come to Hong Kong as illegal refugees, they can get past Boundary Road, Kowloon. They are accepted as Hong Kong people. If they are caught before Boundary Road, they are shipped right back to China. And I always thought this is really absurd, but that's the system, Yeah, so I just felt immediately at home in Hong Kong. It's my kind of place. Yeah.
Okay, so you're working with the Hong Kong Standard, Vishwa Nathan. I think a lot of people remember this famous journalist. But then you make the jump to the big time, Far East Economic Review, Wall Street Journal. These are part of the big American Western corporations. How did you make that jump? Was that difficult?
No, it wasn't difficult. In between, I had an encounter with Mr. Graham Jenkins because it was my bad luck that shortly after arriving in Hong Kong and getting this wonderful job at a high pay by my standards in Hong Kong Standard, Seri CHEAH, who was the proprietor, Viswa was the editor. Seri CHEAH told Viswa, you hire too many people. You overspend the budget. You got to get rid of some of them. So I panicked. I thought I was going to lose my job. Actually, it turned out later my name wasn't on the list. But it doesn't matter. I quickly, in the very flexible entrepreneur style, I left the Standard and joined the Star in Hong Kong. The office was in Causeway Bay. And the boss was a mad Australian named Graham Jenkins, who liked to throw typewriters at people when he's angry. Literally. But he usually missed, so it's okay. But anyway, it was unreal because I was one of a minority of Malaysian people, Indian people, the majority of white people, and they are from UK, Australia, New Zealand. And we got along as a team because we are all doing the same job. But we put up with a lot of strange and funny things in the world of young people journalism. There are stories like the guy who fell on the 1 inch of rain puddle water on the pavement and he was left to drown. Nobody tried to save him. So his nose was immersed in water for just 1 inch and he died. And There was an article in the paper about that. Yeah, that was Hong Kong at that time. It's a kind of a very can-do spirit of the people, relatively young by today's standards. And many people were actually refugees, legal or illegal, from the mainland of the country. And the British were in charge, but they had very small government, very little intervention, just very free market. Yeah.
Okay, so you were doing a tabloid news because the Star, the Hong Kong Star, was very much also a tabloid, wasn't it? Graham Jenkins. And then you started, when you went to the 5 Second Review, that was a business magazine. So is that when you started to get interested in the business side?
I had a very lucky break because there was a very famous, very high-level journalist whom I worship at that time, named Mr. Derek Davis. He's a legend. Later, I think, Nora, you told me that he might have been an MI6 spy or something. I believe that. But he is a legend. Derek Davis was from the British elite, and he went to either Oxford or Cambridge. He married a Japanese wife in the 1950s against the wishes of the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office at that time considered Japan still to be an enemy. No marriage to Japanese women. So he went ahead, and then he had to resign from the Foreign Office, and he became a journalist. So 5 Second Review was an institution in those days. And Derek interviewed me. I just call him and apply for a job. I never really thought I'd be hired. But for reasons that are still unclear to me, he hired me. Yeah, and he hired me in a very haphazard way without really interviewing me. He just said, so you know KL? I said, yeah. Then he said, okay, I hire you, and next week you go to KL to cover the MAS strike. Because he needed someone. At that time, the national airline, Malaysian airline system, they had a strike in 1978, and he needed to cover that. Then he's probably grabbing the first guy that came his way. So that was me. So pretty soon I was staying in the Holiday Inn in KL, covering the MAS strike, and then the constitutional crisis triggered by Prime Minister Mahathir when he tried to confront the monarchy. Yeah. And it was surprisingly easy for me to operate in those days, at least in Malaysia, because the MAS strike is all I had to do was to know what's really happening. And I found out that I could simply walk into the head office and walk into the fax machine room and read all the facts. Nobody had to stop me. It's crazy. You know, if you look like you know what I do, you're confident. So I knew exactly what's going on, the many fax messages between head office and the branches, and how they're going to handle the union. In those days, no computer. Everything written by memo and fax. Yeah. So I don't want to go into all the tricks of journalism, but I can assure you there are many. Some of them I learned from others. Some I devised myself. But your brain has to be quick. You have to have some degree of courage. You have to have deniability in case you're caught, but you must never lie. Yeah.
Okay, so you're working for 5 Second Review. You know, that's a very Western angle. I mean, they hated Singapore, constantly banned from Singapore, hated China, always negative news about China. It's funny, when you look back now, I mean, talking of myself, I wasn't really aware of how biased myself and my crew were at that time, how pro-American and anti-Asian we were. And when you look back now, do you see that?
Yes, I do, Nori. As I told you when we met a little bit earlier today, only with hindsight and the wisdom of age, I hope, I think the Review was actually a racist organization. And it's not only me saying it. Some other former staff said the same thing, that it was very much controlled by British people who had a clear view that the people who know all the answers were the Western people. But at that time, I was young and anxious to establish my career. I did not question the system. I totally accepted it and did my job in accordance with the unofficial guidelines that were handed down. Yeah. I made my name in the Korean crisis in the early 1980s. I made my name again through another journalistic trick. Everyone wanted to know who was this mystery man, Mr. George Tan, who claimed to come from Singapore, Malaysia with a fortune. And he went to buy what was then Gammon House, and etc. So Georgetown recently was the subject of a movie called Goldfinger, which is a big hit in Hong Kong. But I know the real story. And how I know the real story is that I was the first person to discover the real identity of Georgetown. And how I did it is also very curious. For reasons that I cannot explain, not today anyway, I had a I had a photocopy of a passport of a guy named Tan Sun Jin. And I was told this passport belongs to Georgetown. The real Georgetown is a Malaysian citizen named Tan Sun Jin. My problem is the lawyers would not allow me to publish. They said this is too weak a link. We could be sued by Georgetown. And then, as bad luck for Georgetown, not for me, will have it, we were having dinner, Philip Barring, me and a few colleagues, in the Kariana restaurant in Wan Chai. And we thought the service and the food were awful. So we made a complaint to Kariana restaurant. And a few days later, we had a personal letter from Georgetown himself saying, my apologies, please come back and eat another meal at my expense. And then I realized that he signed the letter. So all I had to do was to compare that signature on his letter with the signature on a photocopy passport. And they were identical. And it's a very amazing signature, very artistic, with a lot of curves and dots and what have you. So the lawyer said that's good enough. It's impossible for someone to forge that kind of signature. So we had this article saying Georgetown is actually Tan Sun Jin. He's an undischarged bankrupt in Singapore. He even can't even pay his debts in Singapore. He came to Hong Kong to try his luck. A little bit like me, except I was honest and he was not, you know. And so that was the big, I'm not the only guy, but that was the beginning of the end for the Kariana empire. It's not just my story, obviously. It's a lot of other things, you know. People started dying. Bang Bumiputra. There was a guy named Jalil whose body was found in Bay Fu in the banana plantation. There was a guy who Pricewaterhouse, PwC, whose body was found in the pool, etc., etc. Then after that, I became a reporter in what was probably one of the biggest financial crises ever faced by Hong Kong as a British colony. This is a crisis that started from, I think, September 1983, when the British and the Chinese governments announced that they had reached a stalemate regarding the future of Hong Kong. They were unable to reach an agreement on what happens in 1997. The Hong Kong dollar went into a free fall. Some shops even refused to accept payment in Hong Kong dollars. They only wanted US dollars. Finally, it was rescued by what we now call the Hong Kong dollar peg, the link. I was the first reporter to report that Hong Kong was going to link its currency to the US dollar. Yeah, again, using one of my tricky sources, you know. But the story turned out to be correct, by the way. In October, indeed, it was linked to the US dollar. And then 7 banks failed, including Overseas Trust Bank, which was run by a mysterious Malaysian, Chan Min Tian. And I covered that. I covered Kawa Bank, OTB, etc. All the scandals, all the money. So I make a name for myself in journalism. And then in the mid-1980s, I joined, Robert Kidley hired me to join the Asian Wall Street Journal. And I made a name for myself by covering the People's Power Revolt in the Philippines, where the President Marcos at that time, Ferdinand Marcos, was overthrown. This Mr. Aquino was shot at Manila Airport when he came back in 1986. And the result was months of street riots in Makati and Metro Manila. So the editor of the Wall Street Journal sent me there. I was there for about 6 months covering the revolt. It was been an eyewitness to a major social disruption that became very useful for me when I observed the Hong Kong riots in 2019, etc. The result in the Philippines was the overthrow of President Marcos and etc., etc. Yeah. It's a society in transformation. Yeah.
Okay, so we're finally getting to the point where you're getting a connection with finance, because you just moved from the Five Economic Review to the Wall Street Journal. So what happened? Did you interview fund managers, or how did you get interested in the finance side?
From the late 70s, despite my limited education, I have become fascinated with finance, to be very specific with the stock market. I also do not know how to explain it. It just happened. You know, I believe that, like many of us in this room, we call that a addictive, compulsive personality. There are different personalities among human beings, right? So I'm easily addicted to something, and I'm very compulsive when I'm addicted. So this can be terrible, but this can also be good. So I became an addict of the stock market, and I study on my own. I'm self-taught in accounting. I took an MBA course, but never finished it. And I lost all my money as usual in all sorts of ideas in investing, but at least I gained the necessary painful experience. So by the mid-1980s, I pretty much felt that I knew enough about finance to be able to make yet another career switch. And Robert Kitley, the editor, he hired me again. I do not really know how these things work because the interview again was very haphazard. No real question was asked about my financial credentials. It's just like, you're hired. That's it. Then the next week, I inherited the column called Money and Banking. Money and Banking every Monday was written by me, and later was taken over by Julia Leong, who is now the head of Hong Kong SFC. Yeah, she came after me. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm self-taught. I make use of a very powerful weapon as a reporter, which is I'll see some big financial guy, an expert or guru, and say, actually, I'm only a reporter. I don't know. You teach me. That way, I get the best teachers to teach me how we really work. So I covered syndicated loans, which was a big thing, stock market, central banks. I uncovered the major scandal that the Philippine Central Bank was cooking its own books to deceive the IMF and get loans. That was a big breakthrough for me, make my name. And I really felt very grateful to this day to Dow Jones, my employer, the owner of the Wall Street Journal, for the very, I would say, modern and progressive ideas at that time for how to treat employees. I learned a lot from that. To give a small example, as journalists in the Wall Street Journal, we were given home leave every, I can't remember now, it might have been every 18 months or 24 months. And the editor said to me, okay, you are now going to get home leave. Where is your home? And I say, actually, my home is Happy Valley. And they go, oh, that's very unfair to you, you know? Because most of our colleagues are Americans. They're going back to America. I was one of the few Hong Kong residents. So he said, I will pretend that your home is New York. So I'll give home leave to New York. The first time in my life I've been to America was because of this generous person. Liberal and modern, and he's an East Coast liberal. You know? So to this day, I kind of worship people like that. That kind of America is my kind of America. Yeah. But anyway, just to fast forward, in 1989, I left journalism altogether.
Okay, yes, and that's, I think you joined Morgan Grenfell at the time, right? So you joined Morgan Grenfell, a big, old-fashioned, traditional Western investment company. And a lot of journalists do go and do research with these companies. Were you just doing research, or were you actually investing quite?
I was employed to start the Hong Kong operation of Morgan Grenfell, UK. Morgan Grenfell is we call that a UK high street merchant bank. The boss was CFO Fu Hua, who later became CEO of the Stock Exchange of Singapore. So Fu Hua, who remains friends with me to this day, he was very late coming to Hong Kong because all the other major English competitors had already started in Hong Kong. By the late 80s, I think he was coming under a lot of pressure from head office. Why are you in Singapore and not in Hong Kong? So when he met me through an intermediary mutual friend, he said, I got to make a difference in Hong Kong if I'm going to succeed because I'm very late. So I sold him an idea that we can focus on small cap stocks. So in those days, the whole stock market in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index only had 34 companies, was focused on large cap, well-known companies like HSBC, China Light, Zhong Kong, etc. So I said that part of the market is really saturated in coverage. Why don't we focus on the non-index companies that still are unknown to fund managers? So Fu Hua bought the idea, bought the story, and we started in what is now Hutchison House, small office, Morgan Grenfell Hong Kong Securities. I was the head of research, and I was also the executive director in charge of the front office. So Phu Hoa practiced a divide and rule policy because he was in Singapore. So he had another guy who was in charge of the whole business operation, and I'm in charge of the whole investment operation. And we both have equal seniority. That means he can then, really be in control, Mr. CHEAH himself. This is, okay, no problem. The only problem is that my theory actually didn't work commercially, although it's a good theory. In fact, we knew within a few months that many of the fund managers were interested to read my research, but not willing to give us business. Because theirs was a very comfortable world of long lunches and playing close to the index. So nobody can ever blame them for anything, just by buying index stocks. In case the market goes up, you make money. If the market goes down, your excuse is that the index went down, so you went down. There's nothing to say. So they don't want to take the risk of buying my ideas, which is much more volatile and high risk. So after a year, I began to hear noises from Singapore that maybe they'll close down the whole thing. So I again come out with a new idea. So I went to see Mr. CHEAH. I said, you give me money. We will buy our own ideas with the house account. House account means our own money. And if I still cannot make money, it's time to say bye-bye. I was very worried because Wall Street Journal wanted me back. At that time, there was a guy named John Foster Winans who was writing the Herd on the Street column in New York for the Wall Street Journal. Winans was a homosexual, and he was telling his lover a few days in advance which stocks he would recommend in the Wall Street Journal. And they were caught by the SEC eventually. So the lover was front-running his stock tips in the newspaper. So Winans had to go to jail, and that job was offered to me. So that would be very prestigious. Presumably, I have become an American or whatever. I would be in New York. But of course, I wasn't going to do that. I mean, I really think Hong Kong is my kind of place. Yeah. So, be that as it may, we bought the stocks with the Morgan Grenfell's own money, and we were just simply lucky. There's no other way to explain it. Because in 1990, the first President Bush launched an attack on Saddam Hussein in the Middle East. The market fell before it happened. That was when I was buying. On the day the United States invaded Iraq, the market jumped up like crazy. Sell on the rumor, buy on the news. So I looked like a hero. I made a lot of money from Morgan Grenfell. And because of the 15% sharing, I made a lot of money for myself, But I must admit it was more luck than skill. Yeah.
Okay, now we come to the climactic moment. So you decide to leave Morgan Grenfell and start Value Partners. And that was a bit of a revolutionary moment in the Hong Kong finance investment scene. How did that happen?
Oh, that was a very calculated move because I figured by the early 1990s that I could either end up working for Morgan Grenfell forever. Every 1 million they make, I took 15%. That was a good way to make money too. But the 15% not just for me, it's shared with my whole team. Or I could start my own company. And I thought the time was right. So at that time, I must admit I was very Malaysian. To this day, my main language is English and some Hokkien. At home, I speak Hokkien with my parents, right? My mother, yeah. But I didn't know how to read or write Chinese. And I kind of felt that, rightly or wrongly, that I must know someone from the Hong Kong rich people to have a chance. So fortunately for me, in walked a guy named my partner, Mr. Vinny Ye from Sin Chong, the Ye family. So he and I got along well, despite incredible differences in our background. I mean, he's from the old rich, I'm definitely not, and so on and so forth, right? But we got along well, so we agreed together to jointly start a company called Value Partners. I put in the word value, he put in the word partners, and his dad, the amazing Jeffrey Ye, was the chairman of the company. And we have various rich people in Hong Kong, each owning about 5% of the company. And later we bought them out, yeah? But that's how the whole company was based on the premise that the market in Hong Kong was very inefficient. And we should take advantage of the market inefficiency by focusing our energy on buying non-index stocks. And I devised a word for that called green chips. Green chips means stocks that are not blue chip. Yeah. And it's partly luck and partly skill because the company started with me and young Helen, 19-year-old secretary, and nobody else. And we sublet a little room in the Sin Chong office many people do not remember this, but Xinjiang at that time was headquartered in the Wah Kwong building in Hennessy Road. Yeah. Later we moved to Devon House, Quarry Bay. So Value Partners started with almost nothing, 4 million in capital, 4 million. And me and a young lady, and then Vinny's attention span is very limited. He'll be very interested in something for maybe 6 months, and then he'll forget about it, So essentially I was on my own, but that's okay, it suits me fine. And so I again had major strokes of luck, because I can't remember the exact number now, but I believe in 1993, the first year we started, my fund went up like 40-50% in a single year, in just a couple of months actually. So with that kind of good start, and then I have a weekly column in the Apple newspaper, the notorious Apple. So I was their weekly columnist. So I was preaching about value investing. So I was able to win an audience quickly. So the rest is history. We hit one good year after another, and we became quite successful. Yeah.
Quite successful. This man is so humble. I think he was the biggest investment fund manager of its kind in Greater China, and won all sorts of awards. So yes, quite successful is probably the understatement of the year. Right, well, we're going to open up for questions in a moment.
I just want to add one more point, because I realized that I have failed to put my remarks in the correct context. Quite successful, but you have to think a little bit about the history and timing of Value Partners. Because in my opinion, our success is not just due to personal skill or luck. A lot of it is related to the miracle of Hong Kong and China. Because Deng Xiaoping started the open door policy on the mainland of China in 1979. And the first Chinese stocks were listed in 1990 in Shanghai. Value Partners are in 1993. We hit the Chinese miracle more or less from the very beginning. We got in from the ground floor. And much of the money that we were making for the clients and then for ourselves was due to investing in Chinese stocks at the right time and with great conviction. And one of the books I hope one day to write is about what I witnessed in the 1990s. We were basically buying the export stocks, and we were following this Hong Kong Tauke, the bosses to Pearl River Delta, where they employ millions of people making cheap stuff for export to America, to Walmart. And we bought these companies and make a lot of money. But what about them? There was a joke at that time that the Chinese workers had to make 1 million shirts just to buy one Boeing aircraft. That was the reality of China in the 1990s. So I was a witness to what amount to the fact that one entire generation of young Chinese people sacrificed their entire life to make the Chinese miracle possible. They were the guys, the rows and rows of people earning 300 renminbi a month, working 6 days a week to make cheap shirts and toys and shoes and little electronic gadgets. There was, for example, one company we invested in, they make 20 million calculators a year, the Hong Kong company, for export to America. And the workers there earn more or less nothing, And then at that time, Hong Kong, our little Hong Kong, the economy was equivalent to roughly 20% in size of the Chinese economy. So we are like Superman when we went to China. People, wow, Hong Kong people, they just can't believe it. How can such a small place have an economy 20% of China? Today, by the way, Hong Kong is less than 2.5% of the Chinese economy. We come down a lot. But so you have to see the success of fund managers like me in the context that we were probably more for timing of luck in timing than anything else. Got in at the very beginning of the Chinese miracle, and we had the courage and conviction to ride it all the way up. Primarily with the support of the Hong Kong public, to some extent also Singapore and Malaysian public, that they trusted us and invested very heavily in our funds. At our height, we were managing about 17 billion US dollars. That's a lot of money, And so I can't separate the Value Partners story from the China story. The two went hand in hand. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting. Now, to give you a minute or two to think of some questions, I'm going to ask Michael Lai to come up. Michael Lai is a student, fourth year student, and in finance, and he's going to represent Hong Kong young people, the young generation, because he is very young, early 20s. So we've asked him to start the Q&A with his own questions. So Michael Lai, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. So a little bit background on myself. I'm a final year student at CHEAH UST studying finance, and I'm currently working in our Hong Kong Foundation for the summer. So hence, I want to preface by saying I'm very grateful to be handed the opportunity to share the stage with our esteemed guests, Dato CHEAH and our host, Mr. Tachi. So following up on your story, you said you cannot attribute your success to only luck or only skills, but I'm sure you've had tremendous success in both as a journalist and a fund manager. I'm sure there are some common traits or skills or character that you possess that attribute to your success. What would that common key traits be?
Thank you very much, Mike. Actually, for my profession, which is the asset management, the skill sets required are inherently contradictory, which is why it is so difficult to find a human being that have all these different skill sets combined together. Let me quickly explain. For an asset management company, especially a local brand like Value Partners, to succeed, the first skill you need is that you need to be an entrepreneur. That means you have to be imaginative, you have to be risk-taking, and you have to be innovative, and you have to be good with people. You have to be able to communicate and convince them to give you their support. The second skill set you need is that you have to be a damn good professional investor. That kind of skill set is usually the people involved are very introverted. They are loners. You have to be very contrarian. You have to be very good in research. And usually you don't really want to meet people too much. You are in a world of your own. The fundamental required skill for success as an investor is good research and being a contrarian to buy when people are selling, sell when people are buying. Now, the third skill set needed is that you have to be a good administrator and operational manager. Because running a business is not the same as investing your personal money. You are employing teams of people. That means there's a lot of human being problems as well. So you have to be systematic, you have to be calm, and you have to be actually very hardworking and attention to detail. So you need three skill sets at least in one human being: in entrepreneur, asset manager and investor, and administrator. And you have to be able to do all three reasonably well, one of which you must really excel. Then you may have a chance to start and sustain a successful asset management operation. Most people will have one or two, but not three of the skill sets. In the very big companies, they will employ teams of people who, I would say, share the different skill sets required. So it's a big team but Value Partners for much of his young life didn't have the ability. Can't afford that. It's basically me and a small group of people trying to have all three skill sets and getting it together. And also, Hong Kong, unlike many other countries, including Malaysia or the People's Republic of China, the Hong Kong authorities do not give any kind of subsidy or protection for the local brands, local fund management industry. We never really had any help of any kind, I'm sad to say, from the Hong Kong authorities or anything. So from day one, we are throwing into the lion's den to compete directly with the likes of Fidelity, Templeton, BlackRock. On the face of it, we had no chance because actually they are so big and so competitive. They had the scale that the small local Hong Kong brands usually die within 3 to 5 years. Yeah, just not worth the fight. Somehow we succeeded. And I think we succeeded because somehow the contradictory skills required, I was somehow able to get them together. Not by learning, but by intuition and instinct. Yeah. Hope that explains, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Building on top of that, right? Aside from having those skills, you also mentioned that you were able to catch the opportunity, the Hong Kong miracle and the China growth story. And but that I do believe that's also very important skills to have, is to seize the opportunity when it presents itself. So I'm gonna ask a very selfish question because I'm going to graduate this year. So where do you see the most promising opportunity today?
Not in finance. Unfortunately, as I'm almost like a bracket. The open bracket was at the beginning of the Chinese financial capital market miracle in the early 1990s. I called it at almost precisely the right time. Don't forget, people like me joined the financial industry in 1989, in June. In June 1989, we had a Tiananmen incident. So the financial fortunes of China were at the low point. So I joined at that point, right? Without much hope myself, actually, but just young, yeah. And today, I think China's fascination with Western financial system has gone down a lot. They know that this is a two-edged knife that can help you, but can also cut you. So at the recent third-party plenum, I noticed that they talk a lot about science and technology. They talk a lot about reform. They are going to have at least 300 reforms by 2029, according to this document. They talk very little about finance. I think China come to the conclusion that finance must serve the real economy, not the real economy serve finance. And I think that's totally right. But people like me, my self-interest is now affected because I'm finance, right? So I actually think for the time being, the best chapters of my career are finished. So I don't want you to kind of get the wrong idea. I believe the future may be more in things like science and technology and in creative arts, in creativity, entrepreneurship. I think finance, even Hong Kong, I think we are overbanked, over-financialized. We have to find some other way to grow our society now, yeah.
Don't worry, Michael, you can come and work with me.
I'm sure you still have your best days ahead of you, but I may consider dropping out of finance soon.
Let's throw the questions out to the floor. Anybody like to ask a question? Yes, Prakash over here. Do we have a microphone? Yeah, microphone coming.
Thank you very much. Very, very inspiring story, Dato. Like you said about finance, I enjoy finance a lot myself. Is it today, because you came from an era where there was no retail traders and internet traders, is it even possible, you think, today to do any sort of real, accurate research? Because so much emotion-driven, gratification-driven, and you have millions and millions of people sitting at their computers trading. So they can move everything, even though your research is correct, everything is correct. The possibility of repeating what you did, you think it's even feasible nowadays?
I actually don't know the answer. I had to reflect on this. My instinct is to reply by saying that it will be quite difficult. I think you have pinpointed correctly that the financial system is a monster that has grown out of control. You saw what happened at GameStop, for example, right? It's totally illogical. So it become a mania, a casino-like atmosphere, etc. The old-timers like me have become very defensive. We basically very careful and cautious. I can feel that the system is wrong, especially in the Western economies. But I do not know how wrong is wrong. All I know is that it doesn't make sense. That what we're seeing is a lot of money printing. We are basically engaged in deficit spending. We are mortgaging the future to satisfy the present. We have a political cycle that goes every 4 years or elections, where politicians have to be very populist to buy votes. And we also have a system where so many financial companies are too big to fail. So the normal people, the middle class especially, actually are being indirectly have to make sacrifices to support a monster called the financial system. So I'm part of it, so I must admit, but I'm totally uncomfortable with it. I think something is going to go wrong, but I don't know when and how. Yeah, that's the best I can answer for today.
Okay, nice scary answer there. Another question from the floor. A microphone over to my left, please.
Two quick questions, but you can just answer one of them or you answer both depending on the time. Now, you came at a time where Hong Kong was about to take off. But now to some young people, it seems to be the end of the cycle. So if you have to make an elevator pitch to retain them in Hong Kong, what would you say to them? And the second question is, you talk about the crisis mentality, which I fully agree with you. When we try to mentor some students, including your classmates, they felt that I was a little bit pessimistic. They don't want to listen to the gloom and doom. So any response to that? I buy your theory about crisis mentality though. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thinking regarding Hong Kong present day situation, it's very different from the Hong Kong of my younger days. Basically, my experience in Hong Kong were very shaped by the 80s and 90s. That was my Hong Kong. Today's Hong Kong sometimes also feel like a foreign place to me. I don't understand. The rise we had in 2019 was a defining point for me. Yeah, I think ever since then, Hong Kong has been suffering from what I call a post-traumatic stress syndrome. Yeah, we are still trying to recover from that. For example, I'm among those who feel that Hong Kong it's very clear. Hong Kong needs a lot of reform, needs to restore its competitiveness. Today, when you go overseas and you come back, you find that Hong Kong is just not a very competitive place. It's struggling to be able to attract people to buy things, to do things here, right? So the major four pillars of the Hong Kong economy would be finance, trade and logistics, tourism, and professional services. All four pillars have been, we are seeing declining employment in them. But they are the very pillar, the foundation of what makes Hong Kong great. So we need to come up with something new. But so far we have not, because the social unrest we suffered has turned Hong Kong into a place where they emphasize a lot on national security, Article 23, basic law, that kind of thing. But I think we had to get past this obsession with national security. It's over and done. We have got the legislation in place. So we should now focus on what needs doing with respect to our economy, to people's livelihoods. To do that, you need major breakthroughs in terms of how we think about, because the Hong Kong government keeps talking about innovation. Then later, I discovered that when they say innovation, what they mean is scientific and technology innovation. But as far as I know, in an urban city like Hong Kong, the real innovation should be in social and political changes. That's how cities function. Science and technology, we should partner up with Shenzhen, let them do the heavy lifting. We are not really there. But our society, if we make it more inclusive, more with the people, then we can innovate and become very competitive. I'm thinking in terms of Hong Kong becoming more like maybe Switzerland or whatever. You know? So in the media, I've been writing about the need to take seriously Article 45 of the Basic Law, which prescribes universal suffrage for Hong Kong. I know this is not maybe the right time because there's still this post-traumatic stress syndrome, and we still can't get over the national security issues arising from social unrest. But in the end, we had to come to grips with the fact that our system is no longer very effective in producing a competitive society. One of the reasons is because the government doesn't have the mandate, like the one, for example, in Singapore or Malaysia, to make really big changes. To get the big changes, you need to have some kind of a representative government where you can say, I have the mandate of the people. You have to say at least 2 million people voted for me at the last election, so I can do this. You can't object because I have the people's will with me. In Hong Kong, there are 7.5 million population. There's about 4 million people who are registered to vote. But in recent elections, very few, only about 30% bothered to vote because they fear it's not effective, it's not getting anywhere. But if we have a real Article 45 type election, one man, one vote for chief executive is different. then the chief executive of Hong Kong can say, I'm actually in office because the Hong Kong people are behind me. And the election system in Hong Kong is not going to be like Western style. It's going to be the one drafted and proposed by the National People's Congress in 2014. There is a system where only patriots can stand for election. I'm fine with it. Actually, it's true of most Asian countries that I know. It's a kind of a limited popular representation. Yeah. Only candidates who are past the scrutiny of the central government will stand for. That's fine actually, but at least they have to campaign. They have to connect with the grassroots and find out what people in Mei Fu San Chen and Wong Tai Sin are thinking, as opposed to today's system where it's only a joke. But let me try my joke on it. I personally believe Hong Kong is run by a deep state today. The deep state consists of a collection of former policemen, regulators, civil servants, and accountants. This bunch of people, elected at most by 1,500 people, run the whole territory. That's not a good basis for making the kind of deep reforms we need. We need to have something a lot. That's what I mean by real change and real innovation. That you have to think seriously about changes that honestly will move the needle. Just so that I cover myself, in case I'm seen as politically incorrect, I want to make two further points. One is, we talk about one country, two systems, right? There are many ways to interpret this. But right now, one country, two systems can be taken to mean mainland China is full of enthusiasm for reform. Reform is mentioned every day in the media. And they have 300 plus reforms planned from now to 2029. Hong Kong is another system. It's very resistant to any kind of real reform. They only talk about reform, but they never actually do anything that moves the needle. That may be the real meaning of one country, two systems. And that's very sad for us. It should be the other way around. And then I have carefully written here a quote from Mr. CHEAH Cheng, the director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. Recent quotes. He said, quote, open quote, Hong Kong should recognize, respond to, and proactively seek changes and achieve better development through reforms. Hong Kong can seize opportunities, be bold in reforms, and take initiative to action. Another quote, promise you, last quote. Mr. CHEAH Cheng said, we cannot look at today's new situation with yesterday's old eyes. We cannot use yesterday's old thinking to solve today's new problems. He's talking about Hong Kong. So we need to unite and solve problems using new thinking, new methods, and new routes. We should dare to say new things that have not been said by our predecessors, and dare to do things that have never been done before to achieve breakthroughs. Now, that reflects what I say, right? So I'm politically correct. Yeah? So, so I have written in Ming Bao, Lynette's paper. I read in SCMP. I written in the Hong Kong Shunpo, right? That we need to seriously re-examine the prospect for electoral reform, so that whoever is in charge of Hong Kong have no choice but to talk to middle class and working class people, find out what's bothering them, why so many of them, an estimated 150,000 migrated to the UK. And we need these people to be responsible so that they have to take into account the feelings and wishes of the residents of Hong Kong, whether immigrants or people born here. And we need this system where the chief executive can say, I was voted in by 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people. So that's how I feel about Hong Kong today. But I must admit that the post-traumatic stress syndrome made today, the present day, very difficult to advocate this. And I think we have specific recommendations as well in my paper. One is to appoint a commissioner for competitiveness. We have to have an office looking at this one question. Why isn't Hong Kong more competitive? And what can we do about it? And then I have subheadings, including proposals on the housing and property, on the potential for sales and services tax, so that we are less dependent on housing and land sales for our revenue. Then we can really attack the crisis in property and affordability of housing for Hong Kong people. Then my friend here, Dato Seri, he has been trying to advocate the construction of just 1 or 2 casinos in Hong Kong. to provide a new growth driver. Casey, maybe you better elaborate this. No, let you explain your idea. Okay, much better idea.
Sorry, I got to interrupt here. I think the idea came from us because we are from overseas. From Malaysia, Malaysia is a religious Muslim country. They had a casino. And of course, Singapore, where we also had our business operations. We found that these casinos brought a lot of changes and innovation in the way that tourism start to come in, and the country will kick off from there. But for Hong Kong, it is one statement. You don't have to talk about two systems. You have a casino, the story is told. That's the most important thing. Thank you.
Just to elaborate on Dato Gan, he actually even has a location in mind. You know this complex at the airport? Is it called K11 or something? Sky 11, yeah. That will be a perfect casino because it's on the, right now it's a white elephant, you know. And then on top of that, Hong Kong has managed to spend at least 30 billion Hong Kong dollars of taxpayers' money on this West Kowloon development, which is really unable to justify itself and has to resort to selling land that belongs to the people of Hong Kong to raise yet more revenue, to finance yet more losses. This isn't going to work. This is not the Hong Kong I knew from the 80s, which was much more pragmatic. The major projects in Hong Kong at that time was to build the MTR, which opened in 1980, and then the international airport. Both were perfectly justified and immediately were able to justify the revenue spent. So what's this West Kowloon thing? I don't get it. Yeah, this is not Hong Kong.
Well, we've had lots of drama and a roadmap for the future of Hong Kong. And no one can say that our Hong Kong Foundation is a puppet of the government. Not after this talk. So that's great. We are out of time, but do hang around and talk to people. And most of all, let's give a big warm round of applause to Dato Seri CHEAH. Thank you. Hand back to our MC, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Vitachi. A big thank you to Dato Seri CHEAH, Mr. Vitachi, and Michael for bringing us such an inspirational and fruitful sharing. Please return to your seats. Thank you. I would also like to take this opportunity to once again thank Mr. Daryl for the opening remarks, our venue sponsor, EY Wave Space, and our supporting partners, the Hong Kong ASEAN Foundation and the Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, Hong Kong, Macau. We look forward to seeing you again at our next Insight Forum in September on the Belt and Road Development, featuring Dr. Jonathan Choi as our speaker. Thank you all for coming once again, and please have a lovely evening ahead. See you.